Hello. I think we have some regulars. Kate, Ben, Rena, how are you doing? So today we have Sam Gribben with us. He is a founder, another Kiwi founder, and we're going to be talking all about that. So I'm Shan, I run the Kiwi landing pad. And basically the point of doing all of these is to continue the progress from our sales and marketing jams and basically deliver things, what you've asked for, which is people in market doing it, and Sam's one of those people. So I guess usual format, Sam's going to tell us his journey. I'm going to ask questions. Ask your questions in the comments below, and once we've had a bit of a chat, we'll answer your questions. Upvote the questions you really like. And if you're using Crowdcast, you probably want to swap to Chrome. Anything that I'm missing? I don't think so. Okay, cool. Sam, over to you.
All right. So I was the CEO of Serato before this, which is a New Zealand-based software company, tech company that makes DJ software. I joined in 2004 when there were 4 people in the basement of the house, or a house. And I worked there for 10 years up until early 2014. I think there were 80, 85 people or something like that. And it was, we were all around the world, and certainly in the US, strongest in the US. And coming up to my 10-year anniversary, I was thinking, do I want to do something different ever? And decided, yes, I did. And if I was ever going to do it, then that was the time. The company was really looking good. It had some kind of serious competition from a German company that was out to try and get us, and squash us, and we fought that back, and the roadmap was looking great, and the team was awesome. So I was like, okay, now's the time. And I spent a bunch of time kicking around ideas in early 2014, and Melodics was the one that really rose to the top and really stuck, and that is software to help people learn to play musical instruments. So for me, I was learning kind of. I am not a particularly good musician by any of the measures, but I was learning to play piano and bass guitar and using YouTube a lot. YouTube's pretty amazing for music lessons. There are like literally, I think, millions of music lessons on YouTube. But I was like, man, this is actually super low tech. Oh, cool. Look, someone's already using Melodics. That's awesome. It's super low tech. You can pause a video and you can rewind it, and it's like you could have you could do that with a VHS tape in the 80s. And so I was like, surely there's something else that you could do that would be a little more interesting. It'd be cool if you could plug your instrument into the computer and it would listen to what you're playing and give you feedback on your performance and how you get better. And also, there was a lot of things I was seeing happen in other industries. Language learning, there's an app called Duolingo, which is pretty awesome. Health and fitness are the ones that people know. I think like Fitbit and Nike Fuel Band and all the running apps, they're all using a combination of gamification and social stuff and data visualization and various other things, which collectively have been dubbed persuasive technology. And their techniques to basically help motivate people to do things that they want to do, like take 1,000 steps or learn to speak Spanish or meditation or mindfulness. There's quite a good one called Headspace. There are lots of these things, and they really, really work. And so I was thinking, why is no one really nailing applying this to learning a musical instrument? Because there's, I think, a lot of similarities between learning to play an instrument and learning a language, for example. So that's what we are building. We're building this app that you plug your instrument into, and it gives you feedback on your performance when you're actually in front of it, and when you're not in front of it. It's like, currently I'm on week 3 of my streak, practicing 5 minutes a day, and if I finish that, then I unlock some extra lessons, and so it's kind of motivating you to get into the habit of practicing. So it's actually incorporated the company late 2014, raised a small seed round like a few days before Christmas 2014, which was a bit of a nail biter. and then got stuck into it at the beginning of 2015, launched in October last year. So we worked on it for about 9 months before launching. And we've been in the market 7 months, and we're closing in on 50,000 registered users, and it's all picking up and taking off. There's a little bit of a twist. Up until this point, I've talked about musical instruments, but the twist is that the starting point, certainly for us, was a kind of a niche within electronic music. It was related to the world of DJing where I came from. There are these devices called pad controllers, which are kind of like drum machines, and we are teaching people how to play those. Might seem like a kind of a strange place to start, but I knew from my time at Serato that it was a product category that had gone crazy in the last few years, really, really grown, and lots of interest, and no one really knew how to play them. So it seemed like a really, really good place to start. And that is kind of the quick version of how we got to where we are today.
And so Rita has a question. I'm assuming that, Rena, you're calling through with the developsters. Let me know if I'm wrong. Hi, Logan. So will it work for vocals as well?
Currently, no, but long term, what we're really building is a platform that we hope we can apply to a lot of different instruments. And there's no reason why we couldn't go for vocals in the long term. It's really, I mean, like the platform that we're building is the ability to give you feedback on your performance, and the moment that's like hitting pads, but it could conceivably be singing notes. There's some really interesting research happening at Massey University here in New Zealand around vocals, and that's much more on the technology side. So it's kind of, this seems like a good fit for partnership with us. I mean, one of the big things about Serato, I'd say one of Serato's big achievements was really the brand that was built. And if you're not into DJing, or you're not in the US, you probably, it's changed recently, but for a long time, no one really knew what Serato was unless you were kind of in that world, but it kind of crossed over into popular culture. And there's like a Kanye West lyric with Serato, and Eminem lyric, you know, like there was, oh look, we've got Neil, an early adopter of Serato, awesome, yeah. So like people who know, definitely. And I think that there is a real opportunity in music learning to build that brand, because there isn't any brand really associated. There's no name that people clearly think of when they think of learning to play a musical instrument. There's no like one thing that they go to. And in a world where more and more there are tools to help people learn things, I think there's a real opportunity for us to be that tool and that name. There's more questions. Should I answer the questions? Yeah. Can you freestyle? Yes and no. The question is, can you freestyle with Melodics? Kids wanted to do that. I mean, like the way most people play it is they go through the levels, and then, you know, once they kind of get good at a certain point, they can go onto a screen on some of the lessons and just jam around and have fun. Definitely, that's part of what we expect people to do. And one of the things that we're actually looking at is like making a more dedicated freestyle mode. But at the moment, no, it's just strictly the lessons.
Hey, Sam, I don't know if you know too much about the Developster Kids, but they're based in Christchurch, and they're basically like a alternative school for kids. I'm sorry, Rena, I'm going to butcher this, but they basically just code and create really, really awesome stuff, and create apps, and they're just really creative. So maybe they can work on your freestyle thing with you or for you.
Yeah, cool. We have a Melodics for Educators program, basically free stuff. So I'll send you more about that. Yes. Rena, I think we have met actually in the past. More about the German company. So when I was at Serato, we were fortunate for a long time. We had a really clear run on that market. There wasn't really serious competition. But after a few years, there was a company called Native Instruments that had a really solid product and made a concerted effort to kind of take market share, to come after us. And they had deep pockets and a lot of resources, and we were significantly smaller and down in New Zealand, and they were in Berlin, which is kind of the center of the European music tech market, and also in LA. And basically they kind of came to get us. And how we overcame that, I mean, I think we stuck to our roots. We worked, Tractor, exactly. Company's Native Instruments, the product is Tractor. We had a really, I think, I mean, a lot of our effort and focus was on the product and customer service. Those were the two things that we really tried to build the company on, and we just kept at that. We kept improving the product, not going for lots of bells and whistles. For the longest time, Serato's product had way fewer features than everyone else, but we just concentrated on the core stuff. Didn't try to get into some kind of feature race with the competition, and just really understand what people actually were using it for and what they actually wanted, and making that stuff better. And again, I think, you know, like there is a real opportunity, particularly, I mean, in all industries, but particularly in business to consumer markets and in stuff around music, because there's a kind of a cultural aspect. If you build a really solid brand, that goes a long, long way. And in particular, the kind of DJ tool space, there's a big gap between first and second, and that everyone wants to be using the standard. So if you can really install yourself as the one, it's quite a hard barrier for anyone else to overcome.
On that note, Kate has a question. She says, what kinds of things do you find worked really well in building the Serato brand, and what of those have you carried forward into building Melodics?
Working with artists, and which I think more generally can be described for, you know, like for music, there were artists, right? But working with influencers. Working with influencers and putting a lot of energy into that, into getting them involved in the product development. I mean, even if at times it may have been superficial, asking them for their feedback, getting their opinions and putting it into the software and making them feel like they're part of something is huge. And being, treating the relationship like it is a relationship, like they're doing something for you and you're doing something for them. I'm certainly, again, this time I'm not into having any kind of endorsement contracts at all. It's like, use our products as long as you believe it's the right product for you to use. If it's not the right product for you to use, tell us why, so that we can make it better. And I think at Serato, some of the great successes were really, you know, when we lost an artist, they went to, you know, the other side, another product. We had no contract to say that they couldn't do that. It was just like, okay, you know, fair enough. If that's the tool that you need to use, then use it, and we'll concentrate on getting you back, because we'll make the product, again, the product that you need to use. And we did that a few times. And when we did do it, it was a bigger win than possibly having them the whole time, you know, like getting them back. And you can always tell when someone's endorsing a product because they're getting a paycheck, you know, like it comes through. They're just not genuine about it. And there's lots of like, you know, I use this shampoo because I get $1 million a year to say this, you know, and I just don't think it works. Whereas if they're genuine about the product, then they talk about it in other spaces. And I mean, I think word of mouth is a huge factor, and there is really no better marketing than people talking positively, hopefully, about your product. So anything you can do to foster that. And so, I mean, I think a lot of that comes into customer service, tech support. It's a real opportunity to build your brand and your reputation. I kind of take a not perverse pleasure. What's the word I'm looking for? I really get a kick out of turning really angry customers into advocates. And it's kind of easier than you might think. If you've got someone who's really mad because your product's not working, I think the first thing to think about is like that person might be slightly bonkers, but chances are it's because they actually care about what you're doing and they're genuinely pissed off that it's not working. So if you can take that mad customer and just kind of strip out all the madness and be like, yep, okay, hear you, fair enough, that should work, and then just solve their problem rationally and just keep at them and ignore the yelling in all caps and rude things and abuse, and actually fix their problem and be kind of cool about it. It's amazing how often that person will at the end be like, you know what, you're all right, and that was a pretty cool experience, and now I'm going to go and tell people about it.
Awesome. So I have a question. You started with Serato when you were number 4, right?
Yeah, I think so.
So were you involved in the founding of it, or did you come in at 4?
No, it was founded by AJ Burtonshaw and Steve West, who were at Auckland University together studying computer science. And when I joined, the company was, it's an amazing story. The company was already successful and it was already selling a product, and Serato never, it was all organic growth. It was not investment driven, which is something I come back to like the second time around. One of the big differences is that we have taken investment, and that really does change things. So they had a product which was called Pitch in Time. It was this tool that was used in all around the world, but in particular Hollywood studios. You could slow down sound and music without changing the tone, which was something that kind of existed. You could do it already before Serato's product came along, but Serato just did it way better. So I joined just before the DJ products were launched, and I was hired as general manager, and then over time became the CEO.
I guess my question is like a lot of these technology companies, they have this big focus where the founder needs to be the CEO, and they usually go down that track. And then you came in as CEO as number 4, basically, and then you grew and expanded the business out, obviously, with them over the next 10 years. It's just a little bit of a unique example. So I guess why did they feel like that was the best thing to do, and how did you sort of also grow it out from starting?
Yeah, I think it is a tricky one because there's this pressure. In a lot of ways, it's the social pressure more than anything else. Is I started this thing, therefore I should be the best person to run it. And part of my motivation to start something new was I felt like the part that I was best at and certainly enjoyed the most was growing from the beginning up to a certain point, and I think that a lot of founders hang on a bit too long because they feel like they should, or there'd be some sort of loss of faith in handing it over to someone else. But running a company that is turning over millions of dollars and has hundreds of employees is entirely different from running a company that, you're kind of struggling from salary pay to salary pay, and you're 3 or 4 people. It's a totally different beast. You need different skills and you need different experience. So, I think if we are talking to founders at the small end of the scale, which I believe we are, startups and small teams and relatively recent companies, I would think now about succession. Think now about one day when it all goes really well and it starts to take off, you want to hire someone to do the job that you're doing now. Think about that now, because you need a lot of time to mentally prepare for it. And if you can instill it in the culture of the company, that's a good thing. That doesn't need to be. I think it's rare that someone can start something, grow it really small, and then be running it when it's thousands of people.
Interesting. Cool. And then, so Serato is pretty big in the US, right? Was it always a strategy for it to be big in US? Like, was it big in New Zealand first? Like, what was your sort of go-to-market?
No, it was always the US first. And in fact, I mean, Serato's been going for a long time now, 15 years or a bit longer. But I would say for the first 10 years at least, very few people in New Zealand knew about it. And most of the customers in the US didn't know it was from New Zealand. We'd have DJs from the US touring in New Zealand, and they'd meet the local promoter, or get picked up at the airport and be talking about what was happening. It's like, oh, you should meet the guys from Serato, and the DJs would be like, what are you talking about? They're from Washington State, aren't they? And that's in part because we partnered with a company in just out of Seattle, Washington. And that's how we launched into the US, so everyone thought we were from there. One of the questions is, how many Kiwis work for Melodics? We're currently 6.
Was that part of like why you think you did so well in the US, or is it because you had just a very solid niche and a really good culture around the niche that you chose, or was it?
No, that first partnership was absolutely key and huge for us. We partnered with a company called Rain, which was a kind of quite a boutique DJ hardware maker. And they had a really strong reputation. And we started getting on some really big name artists right in the early days. And there's a guy called DJ Jazzy Jeff, who some of the older people in the audience might remember from a TV show called The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. He was the DJ sidekick, and he's being a TV star, but he's like totally legitimate DJ. He still plays these days. He's still awesome. And he got onto it early, and he was literally ringing up his friends and saying, stop what you're doing right now and get in your car and go to the equivalent of the Rock Shop or the Guitar Center in the US, which is the big chain there, and ask for a Serato. Just do it now. Just trust me. Do it. And they did. And so we had all of these kind of A-list artists all getting on it right at the very, very beginning.
That sounds pretty cool. And then I guess your word of mouth grows from there.
Yeah. And so with Melodics, I mean, we're very much following that same path. It is entirely, there was no plans to do anything in New Zealand first. It was just launched into that market. And I've been, when I was thinking about Melodics and what to make and what to do, and when the company was just kind of new, before the company existed, and when it was just an idea, it was really thinking about like, who do I know and what do they need, and what opportunities are there to build up a lot of network over the years at Serato. And I knew a lot of hardware companies, and I knew the music hardware, people making keyboards and DJ gear and all sorts of stuff like that, and a lot of artists. And so I was really thinking about, well, they've already got, I mean, I certainly don't want to make DJ software because that would be stupid competing with my friends, and it's already done, there wasn't much space. And there's already lots of products for making music and composing and performing, but I saw a real gap where it's like, what about actually learning to play the instruments, like at a kind of a muscle memory motor skill level? Not like there's lots of stuff on techniques and tricks and courses you can do that'll teach you the art of music composition and audio engineering, but very little for like, how do I actually play this? So when I went and pitched the idea to a lot of the instrument makers, and I mean, one of the great things about Melodics we were able to get these global distribution deals in place before we'd written a single line of code. It was like, here's this thing I'm going to make. If I make it and if it's good, will you support it? And they were all like, yes, we will, because that will help our customers to get more out of the products we're making for them. So if you know, there was this big caveat. It's like, if it's good, then we'll do it. So then my mission was just to make it good.
Awesome. So Rena has a question. She says, how did you make the link with the company in Washington State?
It was before my time. It was Steve and AJ that made that connection. It was at a trade show, and there's a who was it? It was a DJ. I think it was A-Track, who is a big name DJ these days. He was a young kid at the time. He was very young. He saw it and he was like, oh, there's some guys you got to talk to. And he went over to the booth at this trade show of the company from Washington, Rain, and he grabbed, I think it was their lead engineer, this guy called Rick, and he was like, come and look at this. And, you know, I mean, it's such an awesome story. I wouldn't recommend that as necessarily a strategy for launching things. Like Serato was like such an awesome product, totally at the right time. It's very, it's quite hard to pull that off. But it was just that dream story of go to a trade show, people are all super impressed with your product. Then an amazing partner walks up to you and says, we want to work together, and it takes off from there.
Okay, so on this note, I guess let's talk about being a second time or doing it for the second time, because I know that's something you enjoy talking about. And I guess the difference between 2004 and 2016, because I'm assuming that it is very different.
Yeah, I mean, it's massively different. One of the things, so, I mean, I think raising money is a topic that startups founders like to talk about or like to hear about. And certainly that's one thing that's probably the biggest difference this time around, I would say, because I had a whole bunch of experience at Serato that I was able to call on, but I didn't have that experience. So it was kind of first time around for me. And I underestimated the cliches. You know, you kind of learn that cliches are cliches for a reason. And one of them was, oh, you know, it'll take a lot of time. And it certainly does. You know, you got to put a lot of time into it for months and months and months. And it's hard because a lot of the conversations you have with potential investors, you put a lot of time into making the connection and then researching who they are so that you can speak to them better, and working on getting the introductions and pitching to them. And then if they say, yeah, that's great, but that's not for us, then basically that whole chunk of work didn't really help you to grow the business. And there's all this awesome other stuff going on. We're growing really fast. There's lots of things to be working on, which in many ways I'd rather be doing because it's making products for our customers and growing and good fun stuff. But you really have to focus so much time and energy on capital raise. So I think just don't underestimate that. I think maybe I did a little bit at the beginning. You know, there's this question, topic I often discuss with other founders is like, do you bootstrap or do you raise money and go for it? You know, and if you raise money and go for it, then you've got this clock ticking because you're spending money faster than you're earning it. And there's this wonderful thing called a runway, which is how long you can go for before you run out of money. And it's just like hanging over you the whole time. Whereas if you are bootstrapping, if you're making money and just paying for your growth out of the money that you're making, then you don't have that time pressure, but you have a different kind of time pressure, which is you can't go nearly as fast. And if you don't go fast enough, then you might just be, you know, like someone else will just be like, oh, yeah, that looks cool. And we'll do that. And we'll just do it 10 times as quickly. And see you later. So no, I have no regrets. I'm enjoying this. It's a good way to go, but I think if anything, just the thing I've learned is don't underestimate the work required. I had a board meeting quite some time ago, and in my board meetings, I kind of like to say, these are the things I'm worrying about. Am I worrying about the right things? Is there something else? Is there something I'm worrying about that I probably don't need to worry about? And is there anything more importantly that I should be worrying about that I'm not? And it was like, when's the next raise coming up? Oh, it's, in 6 months, something. Yeah, fine. They're like, man, you should start thinking about that now. It's like, oh, okay. And the other thing, just the environment has changed so much. In 2004, we had our own home-built accounting system. We were like, okay, we need a forum, so we'd better make one of those. And what else? There was another example of something that we built ourselves that I can't think of it, but in 2015, it was a little bit kind of also the mentality of, well, but we're software engineers and it's some software, so we should build it. But these days, it's just amazing what tools there are available to you. And I think one of the things that I found very valuable is talking to other founders before we got started and just sharing this is the suite of tools that we use and what we use them for and what the strengths and limitations are for each one, because you can just get so much awesome stuff off the shelf now and pay the subscription model where you don't have to pay much up front and you just pay more as you grow, which works all right. And then, if you're paying too much, you can go, oh, do we really need this? Or don't. I think one other thing I've learned is it's always quite a good idea to just ring them up and say, excuse me, could I pay a little bit less, please? And they go, sure. Quite often. And also,
I did that with the software the other day. I was trying to reduce our expenses, so I emailed them. I was like, hey, I do these webinars every single month, and I promote you to all of New Zealand, and we're also not for profit, so how about that? And they were like, yep, you're one of our early users, like, fair enough, like, we'll give you a discount.
I just did that this morning, just before this call. I wrote to a SaaS provider that we use, and I was like, we're B2C and we pay per customer. And I'm guessing that most of your customers have a much higher revenue per user than we do. So it costs us a lot more than it does all of your other customers. How about that? And they're like, yeah, okay, have 20% off. It was like a 10-minute conversation. Anyway, where was I? Tools. So it's amazing. It's just really incredible, and how fast you can go. And you can just kind of, like, what I've done is set it all up and be like, okay, yeah, whatever, here's my credit card, we'll pay for that. And then 6 months in, just kind of went over everything and looked at what we were spending, and it's like, okay, we don't really need that one. We can get rid of that. That one we can try and reduce our costs. You can just like set it all up and then kind of come back to it and optimize it. If you need to, like if it's, obviously you got to be careful with your cash, but the amounts at the beginning are often quite low. So it's more like percentages, and, you got to look at your cost to serve. It took me a while to actually get around to figuring that out. And I was like, okay, that one's way out of proportion. I will negotiate a better deal with them. Top 5 tools. Rena says, what are our top 5 tools? We use Slack, I guess, like almost everyone else at the moment. We don't use email internally. Every now and again, someone will email something from outside of the company and I'll forward it on to someone else, and they're like, whoa, Sam just emailed me. That was weird. So we just use Slack for all internal communications, and brilliant. I don't know what it's like when you're a much bigger team and it's just like everyone is reading everyone else's email. That might get quite inefficient, but for the size we are, it's great. And Trello we use religiously for all sorts of things. It's kind of like the go-to tool until you run out of what Trello can do. So I use it for CRM. We use it for bug tracking. We set up some better bug tracking tools, and then just kind of like not using them because it was just simpler to just stick a card in our daily sprint planning and just put a color on it that meant bug, just like, it's just so adaptable. All the artists that we were working with to make content for Melodics, we just made a Trello board and it was like, who do we need to follow up with? And Intercom is my other big one. And so this is also like, this was in kind of mid 2014 when I set out in the company. I went around and talked to 10 other founders and was like, what tools do you use? And I basically stole this list off other people. Intercom we use it for our support and lifecycle messaging, or messaging, so automated messaging. It's really limited for support. I really would advocate using super limited tools. Like, just use the simple, easy option until you run out of what it can do. Because I think often there's a tendency to kind of over-engineer the solution before you really understand the problem. I mean, that can trip you up because you're like, now we're deep into some of these systems and it's hard to switch, but it just got us up and running so quickly. Payment, we use Chargeify, Payment Express, and BNZ is the kind of combo that a lot of Kiwi startups are using. That landscape is changing with Braintree and Stripe and other options becoming available. I would say look at those other options very carefully now that they are around before you follow in our footsteps. It's all right. I just think it could be better. Yeah, that was 5. Then some.
Who do you use for accounting?
We just use oh, you mean our software? We use Xero.
Cool. Do you use a New Zealand accountant and lawyer, even though you're targeting the US market?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, very much so. I use a couple of different lawyers because we have some specialist kind of like artist contracts. I actually know, well, they're Australian, but they do a lot of work here. But I've recently been talking to a US kind of music tech industry specialist lawyer who we might use for a few other things, but largely for the network and context she can help us with. Yeah.
The reason why I ask is there's quite a big company based in Toronto that's a Kiwi company. They've been running for about 15 years. And they do really large US government contracts, but they still use a New Zealand-based lawyer and accountant, which I found really, really interesting, except for employment law, which they do locally because of the sort of conditions you have to go through here.
Right. Well, I think a lot of it would be like if they are still a New Zealand registered company, then a lot of their law and tax and accounting would be under those rules. I don't know.
Okay, cool. So what else do we want to talk about? I guess the question I had for you was like, you're in a pretty saturated industry, and you've also said this to me in the past where, like music technology is pretty big. It's been big for a while. You have even though it's different, you've got like Spotify and Pandora and anything, and you're also B2C. So I feel like you're sort of fighting an uphill battle against all of these really, really big companies, but then you turn around and you're like, well, actually it's different and we're sort of standing up because of XYZ. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, sure. Well, I mean, from a kind of investment point of view, like going and talking to investors and saying, oh, we're making music technology, then they immediately think of like, well, what do I know in that space? Spotify and SoundCloud, those are 2 big ones, neither of which are like a no-brainer investment opportunity these days. They both have kind of their struggles. So that works against us in a way. Music tech is not virtual reality or one of these other kind of really hot right now areas. But one of my counters to that is that the whole kind of persuasive technology space is really popular right now. That is the habit forming kind of things, Duolingo, Fitbit, all that sort of stuff. And so putting together a case of like, we are Duolingo for learning to play instruments has been quite a good angle. The market size is often underestimated as well. People think, how many people are there actually? How many musicians are there? It's not that big. So being able to be really clear about the market opportunity and the size of it, because it is massive, has opened some doors. But like you got to present this like scenario of how big can it be, and how we're going to go for it. How large can this thing actually be, and can it be a very, very big company? And if you clear about the conditions under which it would be that big, then people are interested.
So, how did you get 50,000 users in like six to 8 months? Because that's a lot.
That's really because of the partnerships we have with the instrument makers. So we are bundling with a lot of the companies making the hardware, and they have emailed their entire user base to tell all of their customers about Melodics, and we've sent out promo codes to give them free lessons. So a lot of these names won't mean anything to people, but we've done mail outs with Akai, Novation, Pioneer, DJ, Serato, Native Instruments, Ableton, Reloop, a whole lot of these companies that make DJ equipment, and many of those mailing lists are in the millions. So that's helped us to reach a huge number of people at no cost. And that, combined with a lot of Facebook advertising, which is really to this point being kind of experimental, just to find out what the costs are, what works, and get metrics and figure out when we have more money. Audio problems. Can you hear me okay? When we have more money to pour into advertising, how we go about it. And Facebook is a super good audience for us because it can be so targeted.
I can hear fine. I'm not sure what's going on. Facebook advertising, interesting. And then what about B2C? Like, what's your experience with B2C in New Zealand? Is there a lot of B2C companies in New Zealand, or how hard is that market now?
No, I think that New Zealand tech companies are more B2B. I'm just thinking, like the big ones, the Xeros, the Vens, those are the ones that people think of, which are, can people hear me? Seems like they can hear you. Yep. Okay, cool. So, one of the things I guess I've found is, say, talking to investors in New Zealand, and I'm like, I'm going to build this big consumer brand in the US. And they're like, that sounds really scary and hard. How on earth would you do that? And then it's like, if they know the Serato story and can see that I've had experience of doing it before, then it makes all the difference. If not, then I think can be a little bit like, whoa, that's really hard. But in general, I don't know. I don't think it's any more of a challenge than B2B.
It's really interesting, the path that you've taken. I guess a lot of people are trying to crack the US market, and it's fascinating that you've just managed to find these partnerships with these companies. And was that really through your links with Serato, or did you sort of just approach those people and be like, hey, I'm doing this? Like, did you have to really work on your pitch or your messaging, or how did you approach that?
No, it really was. It really was just history I had with them from Serato. So, I mean, Pioneer DJ, for example, is a very traditional Japanese company, and if you want to work with them, you spend years building the relationship, and nothing happens. We, at Serato, we went up to Japan several times a year for 5 years or something, and eventually it gets to the point where you can do big, amazing things. And fortunately for me, that really carried over into the new role. So Pioneer were really supportive. They've given me space on a booth at a trade show, because they know you, and they know, it just takes a while to build up that trust. But it's also there's a bit of momentum, a bit of a snowball effect, because there are plenty of brands that I'm working with for the first time, but because they can see what we've been doing with all of the others, they're like, oh, okay, this is Melodics is working with these big players. There's a bit of FOMO that you can kind of exploit. It's like, we should be as well, because they're doing things with those people. Okay. And you can, if you can keep the pressure on that and just keep going, it really just does build on itself.
A case study is a big part of that.
Yes. I mean, I guess I wouldn't call them that, but yes. Like, I haven't thought of them as case studies, but there's one I'm doing at the moment, which is exactly that. I'm forwarding them examples of all of the other emails we've sent with all of the other partners, and saying, we've done this. Do you want to do one just like this?
Awesome. So I guess, the other thing that people really consider with their businesses is, I mean, you're operating pretty much purely in the US, but you're operating from New Zealand, which is fascinating. So do you really need to be in the US, or is it different, or do you just pretend that you're here? How does that work for you?
I'm really keen to try and do again what we did at Serato, which is to make a successful international company that is very much based here in New Zealand. It's totally doable. I think I need to get up there and spend time there. I mean, I was up in LA and San Francisco in May, and that was hugely valuable. Just kind of meeting with the people that I was already working with, and just reminding them of what we're doing, and saying, hey, remember Melodics, and you should do this and you should do that. You just got to kind of get in people's faces. But I mean, our market is, I'd say, the US is the biggest single market, but then followed by Germany and kind of France, UK, Western Europe, and then there's quite a bit in Japan, a bunch in China and Russia. So it's very international, and so you can't be all of those places. You've got to be somewhere, and why not be here?
Awesome. We've seen a bit of a trend where it's like, sort of go where your customers are, instead of coming to, I guess, the golden child, which is San Francisco. So it's interesting to hear that, like, technology allows you to be based wherever you want to be, and you don't really see too much of a barrier to building a company out of New Zealand, as long as you spend time regularly in local markets, or the local market. Yeah,
and I think, in the US, LA is probably the biggest place for us because of the artist world there. But even then, I would still travel around and still trying to get to a few different places. So, I mean, it's harder from here because you've got further to travel, but there are lots of other benefits, like this beautiful Auckland weather we have right now.
What else do we want to talk about? Do we want to talk anything further about investment? Like your tips, I guess you're raising at the moment. Do you have any tips for approaching people, or yourself?
Well, I guess one of the things that I've learned through this process, I started off by just talking to anyone that would take a meeting with me. Did that for a little while. And despite having really clear advice from one of our investors that, investors are kind of geared up to take meetings. They have people whose job it is to just check out, it's called deal flow, I think. Just basically kick the tires of anything that comes along that meets certain criteria. So now I'm being much more selective. Are you B2C friendly? Are you global? Are you willing to invest in a company that's based out of New Zealand? I mean, I had some great meetings with US investors who are like, this is awesome. Can you relocate the whole thing to the US because you have to be here for us? And it's like, no, I can't do that. Are they scared off by music? You know, kind of getting those questions up front so you don't waste time basically pitching to people that are just never going to invest. And the other really big one in that is, do you invest at the stage that we're at now? I mean, maybe that's stating the obvious to everyone, but it's probably worth, I think, making clear is like we are early stage, post-launch, we have revenue, and we're growing. So we're in this kind of category. It's not seed, it's not Series A. The fact that it's neither of those things really obvious is a bit of a challenge for us. Very obviously, we're not in that bucket or that bucket. It's a little bit hard, but and just and then talking to the investors and saying, what other companies have you invested in at this stage? I don't know if this is also stating the obvious, but look at if you're talking to a VC, look at their portfolio, look at all the companies they've invested in, do a bit of research. The more you can find out about them, the better. And the more you can sound like you know what you're talking about their business and the companies they've invested in, the better it'll go.
Awesome. Now, what about hiring and mistakes?
I am fortunate to have made lots of hiring mistakes in my past, and learned from those. This time around, we're going pretty well. I mean, it's a small team. So like the vibe of the team is just super important, because there's no like, this is your territory and this is your territory and this is the chain of command and this person reports to that person and you need to do your weekly status report. It's just like we're all in on whatever it is that we're doing. Hiring tips, I don't know. I think really just at this stage, I can't stress enough the importance of the culture that you want to develop and the cultural fit. I mean, this is the phase where you establish all of that and you set in place things that will be around for years, hopefully, in terms of how you operate as a company. So I read once, I think it was Vaughan from Vend had a test. Would you sit next to, or he talked about a test at Vend, would you want to sit next to this person on a long haul flight? Could you handle talking to them for 13 hours between Auckland and California? And if not, don't hire them. It's like, that's a pretty good one, actually.
We had a similar one at the sales and marketing jams where they say, would you invite them to your birthday party? And if you'd say no, then you probably shouldn't hire them. Yeah,
exactly. I mean, the challenge with that, though, or the challenge with this in general, is that you can become quite homogenous, monocultural. You got to balance that with diversity. You need diversity and diversity in the kind of current, the conventional sense of not all people of exactly the same demographic, but also just personality diversity. So, and that's where I've had lots of opportunity to make mistakes both ways in my career hiring, of like getting a bit cliquey and everyone all kind of the same, and then a new person comes in and they don't think the same, and so they don't gel and they get kind of pushed out. It's too much. And also just hiring people that were just never going to fit and it was never going to work, and making mistakes that way too.
Interesting. So Rena asked, do you feel like you get the right support from NZT and others at this point of your journey?
We've been really fortunate with Callaghan. They've supported our R&D efforts with a grant. That's been awesome. At the time when I was going through the application process, I didn't think it was awesome at all, because it took a lot of time and it was really painful and hard work. They've improved that process a lot since then, I think. And it was also because I I don't know, I felt like I wasn't going to get it, and then I did get it, and it came through, and it's amazing how a regular payment from them makes you forget about all of that trouble and pain. NZT, I was a little bit late with, a little bit slow with. Just I think I had a contact there who then left, and but now I've got a really good person, and starting to do things. Started to go do things with them. We went for the Callahan grant pre-launch, and in fact, it's an R&D research grant, so it's kind of independent of your launch or not launch. Certainly, in their eyes, it's like independent of any commercialization. Really, it's like, what R&D can we support you to do that you wouldn't otherwise be doing, or we can make go better or faster or bigger?
What's some of the biggest things that you felt useful from like either your community or some of the biggest stuff that you have you would encourage people to do on this journey?
Did you say at the very beginning you had some regulars on this?
Yeah, so I think pretty much everyone here, bar like maybe one person, is a regular.
Yeah, cool. I mean, I think stuff like this. I got involved with a group in Auckland called the Flounders, which was company founders and CEOs. I was a bit of an imposter because I got involved when I was at Serato and I wasn't a founder at all. But I still meet up with those people, and it was a variety of stages. It was like small 1-2 person teams who had day jobs and doing startups on the side, right up to, growing really, really fast and 50 people or so, like kind of almost post startup. But we all learnt from each other. And that's like, if one thing I would say, that just try and talk more to other people. I think it's something that in New Zealand we don't do well enough. Just try and, and the kind of the way that manifests itself is there are so many amazing Kiwi tech companies and startups and success stories that just no one knows about because they do their thing and they get into their industry, be it DJ software or movie ticketing or speed curve, website optimization, measurement. There's like gurus in their field used all around the world. No one's heard about them because they're not talking to other people. They're just doing it.
In San Francisco, we have an event called the Flat White Meetup. That guy, Horrocks, who just sold Carnival in New York, he started it there, and then we took it to San Francisco, and then we've started doing sort of like the residents and the people in the community, they now come and share what they work on every single day. So you spend a lot of time in music, I spend a lot of time in community, some of our residents spend a lot of time in like AI, machine learning, robotics. And so we're like, okay, we hear about all of that other stuff every single day. We want to know about it, but we sort of can't divert our attention to it. So then now we've got this founders meetup, which is founders come along, they all meet each other because they're visiting or they're based here. And then we get one of those guys to talk about, like this morning we talked about robotics for an hour and a half, which is pretty cool, and like driverless cars. And he's developed like a drone docking system in flight where it's like refueled, which is super cool and crazy and awesome technology. And he's like one of the only people in the world who are actually managing to pull it off successfully.
Wow.
And so now he's here on a contract to be able to do that. But like sharing this sort of information. And then one of the other guys is really awesome with machine learning, and he's been optimizing this wine distributor's e-commerce site and increased their revenue by 70%, which is awesome. But yes, definitely sharing those learnings and also different fields of information that we hear a lot about but don't necessarily have the time to go into is useful too.
Yeah, and I think one of the things about those groups, or one of the things that's worked really well with the Flounders group in particular, is that there's a wider talk and dinner and drinks kind of thing. A few people do a little presentation and then everyone chats to each other, which is cool. That happens once a month or every few months. But from that, what we're trying to do with it is spin off smaller groups where you have a smaller group of, say, 6 or 8 people and you meet regularly, and you get to know each other, and you get to trust each other, and then you share your actual numbers, and you share stuff that you wouldn't share with anyone that and you talk about your real problems. And over the course of, it's not going to happen straight away, but if you do that and you meet once a month, then by the time a year comes up, you know these people, you know what they struggle with, you're more kind of engaged or invested, and you can be like, I can help you with that HR problem. Let's get together next week and we'll go have a coffee and I'll talk you through what I have done in similar situations, and it becomes more and more valuable. So I think do the meetup type things, but try and put together your own. I mean, that was always the intention with Flounders, was to try and spin off these kind of dinner groups, which is how it had started.
We've noticed with the Sales and Marketing Jam community that we now have online and the platform, we noticed that some of the more senior founders were chatting amongst themselves, but then they started sending through numbers. And then so we would take the numbers and I would check with them if it was okay to send them on to my boss or, some of the investors in our network, or just be able to jump on and help them, because we had this information that we all of a sudden could do something with. If you've got $500,000 in recurring revenue, or you've got a certain amount of funding or a certain amount of customers, etc., you become really easy to help in certain areas, especially if you're looking for very specific information, and we have that network, which is pretty awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, do you guys have any more questions? And Sam, do you have anything else that you want to talk about that we haven't covered?
I'm good. Any other questions?
Cool. This has been super fun. Thanks so much for sharing everything. I think we've got a lot of information, a bit of a journey, what it's like now, some of the tools and tricks that you use. And yeah, I think that's great.
Cool.
Thanks, Sam.
For having me. All right.
Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.
All right.